Happy October, everybody, and continuing on in our Halloween series of serial killer movies, I figured the next logical choice is to talk about the other Hannibal Lecter movie that I also really like. Now, for those of you who are disappointed that this isn't a Revenge of the Remakes video, that I should really be doing Red Dragon versus Manhunter, which actually does have the first appearance of Hannibal Lecter on the big screen ever. To that, I can only say I tried. I originally did want this to be a remake video, and it's still in the mix for potential remake videos in the future. I just didn't have a physical copy of Manhunter like I do for Red Dragon, and I also couldn't find it available on any streaming service for free. So yeah, it's just Red Dragon today, and if you still want me to do a Revenge of the Remakes with Manhunter in the future, let me know in the comments and give a like on this video so I know that you actually care about this Hannibal Lecter series, and I'm not just doing it for the fun of it. Red Dragon. So Red Dragon came out in 2002, was directed by Brett Ratner, and was the long-awaited prequel to Silence of the Lambs. That's right, prequel. They had a sequel to Silence of the Lambs and it didn't do so hot. People don't really like it. I don't really like it. But thankfully, for the sake of this franchise, Silence of the Lambs was the second Thomas Harris novel, and there was one that came out before, and that was Red Dragon. And like I said in my intro, there was a version of this story made back in the 80s, and it was called Manhunter, and that movie really does have its merits as an adaptation of this kind of story. But after talking about Silence of the Lambs, I had to do Red Dragon because for me, this is the one that works the best. So let's get into it. Now, the first thing I should tell you about this movie is that at first glance, it does appear to be very similar in formula and style to Silence of the Lambs, and that's because it is. The basic setup of these movies are identical. You have Jack Crawford reaching out to someone who's tangentially connected to the FBI but isn't an official, regular FBI agent to come in, investigate a serial killer case, and as a consultant they bring in Dr. Hannibal Lecter to help crack the case, unravel the clues. And when you break it down like that, yeah, these movies are incredibly similar, but there are some notable differences here. For one, this version has a prologue sequence, a pretty extended one at that, where you see how Hannibal Lecter got caught in the first place, and he got caught by FBI agent Will Graham, played by Edward Norton. And Will is the guy you want when you're trying to hunt a serial killer. He's the guy that can go into a crime scene and map it all out. He can tell you exactly what went down here, and more importantly, he can understand the why behind it. He really has a gift, or I guess you could see it as a curse. This movie kind of plays it both ways, but he's got this ability to get inside the head of these serial killers, which, yeah, I can see how that's not a fun gift to have, but when you're FBI, that is incredibly useful. So that's basically where we meet Will. He's on this case, he's trying to hunt down this cannibal, all the while enlisting the help of esteemed psychologist Dr. Hannibal Lecter, who's not in prison yet, he's free, and he is the serial killer that they're after. And the first scene of this movie is the scene where Will figures out that Hannibal Lecter is the killer that they're looking for. And it goes down about as smoothly as you would expect. Will does end up capturing Lecter, which we know because we've seen Silence of the Lambs. We know that Hannibal Lecter has to end up in jail at some point, so this makes sense. But that doesn't mean Lecter isn't going down without a fight. He takes these quills out of this umbrella holder looking thing, and he just stabs Will in the side with them. But then Will grabs even more of them and stabs Lecter back, and then Will shoots Lecter twice. I'm pretty sure he only hit him 2 times. He unloads the clip, and some of them hit, some of them miss. He is bleeding out after all, so I can understand the inaccuracy. But this is one of those moments, and it happens twice in this movie, where people survive things they really shouldn't be surviving. Both of these people should be dead from their wounds. There's a possibility that Will could have survived being stabbed, but Lecter got stabbed and shot twice in the chest. The dude should be dead. But this is a Hannibal Lecter movie. Even though he is still just a supporting character, he's by no means the lead. Although I'm pretty sure he does get more screen time here than he did in Silence of the Lambs. And a lot of that's probably the star power of Anthony Hopkins and the fact that he's a big name now and the popularity of Hannibal Lecter is on the rise. So we want to see more of him. And Red Dragon is the perfect opportunity to do that. Because in another storytelling choice that is different from Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter views him and Will's relationship as arch nemesis. He's the Lex Luthor to Will's Superman. They are rivals fighting to the bitter end. After Will locked him up, Lecter has just hated this guy, hated his guts, just wants to break him psychologically at every opportunity, which is very different from how he acted around Clarice. With Clarice, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say he probably had a crush on her. He found her attractive and wanted to be extra charming and polite because he did like the girl, even though he did ultimately just use that relationship for his own freedom, and then once he was free, he was like, see you later. But here we have a much more adversarial relationship. Lecter is not nearly as charming and put together and suave as we were led to believe in the first movie. Here he acts less like a James Bond villain and more like a real-life serial killer. We always have to watch for him back or think about how much Lecter knows and are we really a step ahead of him this time? And that does provide a lot of legitimate suspense and thrills, especially during a scene around halfway where they're trying to decode a message from inside Lecter's cell, where they obviously have to have Lecter outside in the holding cell. And in order for him not to be suspicious about what's going on in the room, they have this elaborate ruse with the lights and the janitor trying to create this idea that, oh, that's a maintenance issue, that's why it's taking so long. And it's played beautifully because you don't really know at that moment if Lecter's being fooled, and ultimately it turns out he wasn't, and go figure. I don't know, Lecter just seems to have a lot more creep factor now that he is the enemy of Will, instead of the polite but still untrustworthy partnership that he had with Clarice. But now that we've established the dynamic between Will and Lecter, let's talk about the actual story. Because prologue aside, the movie really starts with Will retired. That's why I said that Jack Crawford recruited someone who's kind of connected, because after that incident with Lecter, he got healed up and he got a pension and they set him up in Florida. He's living the life with his wife and kid, but then Jack Crawford comes knocking, this time played by Harvey Keitel, which is just brilliant casting. And he's like, yeah, Will, we got this new one. He's called the Tooth Fairy. Let's see if you can't figure out what he's about. You'll stay in the background. Don't worry. You're not really in any danger at this point. And to the surprise of no one, that turns out to be a lie, because Will is just so good at his job and he makes so many enemies and he's kind of a public figure that just being involved in the case will put a spotlight on him. And Will knew that going in. His wife even tells him so, but they do it anyway because it's just the right thing to do, and he just wants to save lives. If he can do anything to save lives, he's gonna do it, even if that means putting himself at risk. But now let's talk about the Tooth Fairy, because the Tooth Fairy is an interesting villain. He's not quite as disgusting and just flat out repulsive as Buffalo Bill was. In fact, I would say as far as portrayals in the movies go, I actually do see a certain sympathetic side to Francis Dollarhide, also known as the Tooth Fairy, which of course by no means excuses any of the things he does. He does some horrendous things in this movie, because here he's not just after women on an individual level, he's after families, specifically the moms, and he does unspeakable things to them, and I'm not going to go into detail about what that is, but it is more intricate and involves the whole family, and yeah, I guess that's all I can really say about that. But Francis Dollarhide as a character, I also think is more interesting than Buffalo Bill, because Buffalo Bill was just a crazy person. He was a deranged lunatic. He thought he was transgender, but really that's just an outlet he chose for his more depraved feelings and resentments, and the less we say about that, the better. But here I feel like you get a much better idea of who Francis Dollarhide is or was, because on the surface he's just a normal-ish looking guy. Yeah, he's got this scar on his lip, which means he had some soft palate reconstructive surgery. He doesn't talk all that well. He's got a bit of a funny voice. He's very sensitive about his face. He's kind of a recluse, but he does hold a steady job at Chroma-Lux, which is this home movie film development company. And just that detail of, oh, he has a steady job, he has coworkers, he has a girl that he has a crush on, that automatically just makes him so much more sympathetic than Buffalo Bill. We didn't know Buffalo Bill's day job. Honestly, he probably didn't even have one, but Francis Dollarhide does, and there's people that actually care about him. For instance, like I alluded to before, there's a girl he has a crush on, and she has a crush on him. Her name is Reba. She's blind, which for a Dollarhide, that's even better because he's all sensitive about his face. Even though the rest of his body is like jacked human perfection, the dude is in great shape. He's very strong, which just makes him even more dangerous, really, when he goes about these killings. Oh, and did I forget to mention that there's a demon on his back? No, I don't mean that figuratively, even though, yeah, I guess he does, because he's got this other voice in his head that he hears. No, he literally has the Red Dragon painting by William Blake tattooed on his back, because his whole mission in all of this, to become the Red Dragon fully, to fully grasp that identity. And yeah, that voice is telling him to do that through murdering families. Which, let's take a moment and really talk about what his motivation is, because his whole thing is to become the Red Dragon. And the Red Dragon is this demonic dragon thing depicted in William Blake's painting, The Great Red Dragon and the Woman Clothed in Sun. And I think it's the woman clothed in sun part that often gets left out when people talk about this movie. And I think it's because the Red Dragon part is, for one, the title of the movie, and that's what everyone wants to talk about, and the Red Dragon, and that's what he wants to become, and that all makes sense. What I noticed watching it this time around is that the woman clothed in sun has just as much to do with his whole transformation process as the dragon part is. And all the people that the Red Dragon tells him to kill, they're the mom specifically, and the two that he kills in this movie both have blonde hair. So there's the woman clothed in sun. And if you look at the painting, it's the dragon dominating over this woman. And without getting too deep into the metaphor of the painting, let's just say that he needs to dominate over these women to become the Red Dragon. It makes sense in a very twisted, messed up kind of way, which only makes his story more tragic because the woman that he's got the biggest crush on, that they actually start sparking up some kind of awkward relationship, is Reba, and Reba's got blonde hair. And that's where Ralph Fiennes does such a great job in this role, bringing humanity to this serial killer that really doesn't deserve any humanity. You really buy that the dude is conflicted and he doesn't want to do this to Reba. I mean, he had no problem doing it to these other women, but the woman that he actually cares about, he can't bring himself to do it. So he just throws himself into this downward spiral. And I'm already getting ahead of myself because I haven't even talked about Freddie Lounds yet, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman. And Freddie Lounds is this tabloid journalist. He made a name for himself because of what he printed about Will Graham back when he was at the FBI. So yeah, he's basically the serial killer TMZ. And they find out that the Tooth Fairy reads the Tattler. They use Freddy to publish this piece to try to make Will a target for the Tooth Fairy, to try to lure him out of hiding, to try to get him to expose himself. And what ends up happening is the Tooth Fairy goes after Freddy. And what we get is probably one of the more bone-chilling moments in this movie, because this movie really isn't super terrifying. It's more of an interesting crime procedural with admittedly a few jump scares. And that is a big departure in style from Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs had no jump scares whatsoever. Everything was on the screen, and really a lot of it was implied things that your imagination makes up to fill in the gap. With Red Dragon, however, it's a very different style. There is still that kind of bluntness that you get with the serial killer antics and the killings and the dead bodies and stuff. But because this came out in 2002 and jump scares were all the rage in the early 2000s, this movie has jump scares, and some of them work and some of them don't. And really the best ones are the ones where it's not really the jump that gets you, it's the character behind the jump and the build-up that really feels like it had purpose and wasn't just some cheap scare to get the audience to jump at that moment. But this scene where Freddy gets captured by Dollarhide and he's shown who he is, and he kind of explains the whole becoming idea to Freddy, and you just see the look on this dude's face, and he is not having a good time, and you're not having a good time. You're uncomfortable because you don't know what this guy's going to do to him. And ultimately, it's a very effective scene in showcasing who the villain is, what his motivation is, what he's trying to do, in a way that doesn't feel like exposition and just feels natural and terrifying at the same time. Which would be awesome if the very next shot didn't make me laugh out loud every time. And that's when it cuts from Dollarhide doing unspeakable things to Freddy to the open street, and there's this guy at some kind of newsstand thing, and he's looking out, and you see this wheelchair that's got a dude in it, and it's Freddie Lounds, and he's just rolling down the street on fire, obviously dead. He's not like screaming in pain or anything. It's just this corpse glued to a wheelchair, on fire, wheelchair's on fire, rolling down the street, and this guy is just watching it go all the way down. And this old guy is acting his heart out. He's given the most extreme, horrified expressions, but I see that edit as weirdly comedic. I don't know, maybe I'm just messed up. Let me know in the comments. Do you think it's kind of funny how they edited these two scenes back to back? Because you go from horrifying, gross, disgusting, edge of your seat, white knuckling, I want to get out of this room. But then it cuts, it gets real quiet, you just see a flaming wheelchair go down the road. I don't know, I just think that's funny. But now let's get to the climax of this movie, because this movie really has two climaxes. The first of which happens at the Dollarhide mansion, and the Red Dragons just had enough waiting. It's time to kill Reba. Reba's in the mansion. He sets fire to the mansion. He takes out a shotgun. He's gonna try to shoot her, but he just can't do it, so he turns it on himself and he blows himself away. At least that's how it's shot and edited. And Reba, who's blind, she buys it 100%. Dollarhide's dead, mansion's burned down, case closed. But not the case, because that's just the distraction to get Dollarhide to go to Will's home address in Florida. Because Lecter, the schemer that he is, was in communication with Dollarhide and actually gave him Will's home address. Yeah, remember how I said that Lecter sees Will as his nemesis? Well, he thought the best way to get back at his nemesis is to send the serial killer that Will's chasing directly to his home address to kill his family and Will when they're not expecting it. And that's where you get part 2 of this climax, because Dollarhide did not die in the fire. He actually used the dead body of one of his co-workers that he killed because he was hitting on Reba. He was kind of a sleazy guy to begin with. And that's the corpse that Reba felt to make sure he was actually dead. But now Dollarhide is back and he has a showdown with Will. And this is the second time where people survive things that they really shouldn't. And I'm not talking about the mansion fire and that fake out with his death. Now I'm talking about when Will's in the bedroom, Dollarhide's coming up the stairs and his wife starts coming up the stairs behind the killer, not realizing the killer's there. And Will tells Mary to get down and he just unloads on Dollarhide through the bedroom door, and Dollarhide falls down, presumably dead. Or is he? Because after a brief moment of catharsis, Dollarhide, like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees, gets back up and he's gonna get him one more time. And that's where Molly, his wife, actually gets the final kill, which you can kind of see coming, especially with the one random scene that's just in the middle of this movie where Will is teaching Molly how to shoot a gun, and she's actually a pretty good shot. That was clearly setting up this path right here. And as for a literal Chekhov's gun, it gives Molly a little bit more agency and makes her feel like a more complete character instead of just Will Graham's wife. And that really is the end of the movie. Oh, except for a little stinger at the end where Lecter is locked up, clearly setting up Silence of the Lambs. But that's pretty much it with Red Dragon. There's a lot of plot in this movie. There's a lot of details that I left out. I was not going to do a play-by-play of the whole movie. We'd still be sitting here 2 days later if that were the case. All I can really say is I love this movie. When it comes to the Hannibal Lecter universe, I don't think the storytelling and the mystery and the investigation elements get better than they are here. And for me, I just find the relationship between Hannibal Lecter and Will Graham, Will Graham's background of actually being FBI, having that skill set, that special gift to visualize crime scenes after the fact and reconstruct how they might have gone down, is such a cool idea that really gets capitalized on in the Hannibal show. I actually think the Hannibal show does a better job of showcasing Will Graham's gift or curse or however you want to interpret it and the struggle therein than this movie does. Here it's mostly just talked about, and even though Edward Norton is giving a fantastic performance, you still get the feeling that he's still ultimately a good guy. He won't go down the road too far, he won't mess up his own mind too much. But in the Hannibal show, you are given time to really understand Will's plight, and I would highly recommend checking that out too. But all things considered, this is still a great manhunt movie. It's a great horror movie. Just like Silence of the Lambs before, you can't really put it in a specific box. It's kind of got a little bit of everything. But now we turn it over to you guys. What do you think about Red Dragon? Or better yet, let me know what your favorite Hannibal Lecter related thing is. Whatever you think, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. As always, I'm Colby. This is my Nerdy Talk, and I'll see you in the next video.